let's end it off here regarding the legal suit, the indictment of Mr. Number 45, the best president, let's be honest, folks, in modern America, better than even Reagan in some aspects. But what I wanted to do is kind of pull up some clips here from lawyers. We have Trump's lawyer previously here talking about the indictment and the statute of limitations. And then we'll move into another lawyer, I believe on CNN or MSNBC, discussing what he thinks about it. It's John Bolton. And just getting kind of more of an informative viewpoint on what the heck is going on with this whole thing, because nobody really knows. So here's Megyn Kelly's show, and you have Alan Dershowitz. I'm sure many of you have heard of this man, prior Trump lawyer, talking about the arraignment, talking about the indictment, as well as the statute of limitations, who he's a fan of here in terms of the statute of limitations, and basically that being the best argument. Let's roll it.
Quickly, for a ruling on the statute of limitations. Remember the argument on the
Wait, let me ask you about the okay, can I ask you about, let me ask you the statute, because I had a debate here on the program yesterday. Arthur Aidala, who I know you know and like, and another lawyer, state attorney from the district that covers Mar-a-Lago and Palm Beach. And they were saying they weren't that moved by the statute of limitations argument. And I know you love it. And so just for the viewers who are listening now, it's basically, we believe we're speaking at a time at which the indictment has not yet been unveiled. We don't yet know exactly what's in those 34 counts, but we still understand it has to do with the Stormy Daniels hush money payment, and that Trump didn't record it properly on his business records. He made it look like a legal payment to Michael Cohen, who paid it $130,000, and that's not in and of itself necessarily problematic, but that would normally be treated as a misdemeanor. He's elevating it to a felony by saying it was used to cover up an underlying crime, which would have been an in-kind contribution during the election run-up. Right. It's a long and convoluted thing. So dumb it down for people who are not lawyers. What is the statute of limitations problem?
Here, the statute of limitations is very important. It goes back to the origins of law. And there's a 2-year statute of limitations on the misdemeanor, 5 on the felony. The theory behind the statute of limitations is it doesn't run when the person is an escapee. He's running away. You can't find them. And so the statute has an exception. If you can't find them, if he's a fugitive, or if he's out of the state continuously. Now, keyword. Why can't you indict him if he's out of the state? I have the best proof. Nobody could ever beat me on this argument. Of course you can indict him when he's out of the state. What's the best proof? They indicted him when he was out of the state. This indictment came down last Thursday. He was in Florida. If they could indict him while he was in
I was sitting there golfing up a storm, but I'll tell you, you wouldn't believe this, folks. Folks, I'm telling you right now, you wouldn't believe it. They sat there and said, hey, you're going to get indicted. And I said, by what? What'd I do, send $130,000 of hush money to a porn star? Really? Really, folks? You're going to believe that? They've done nothing. They've done nothing but go after me and my family. They've got over everybody other than Joe Biden. They've got over everybody other than Hillary Clinton. They've got over everybody other than Barack Obama, and they're going to go after me over some hush money? Some hush money? They indicted me while I was in Florida, sitting there visiting the golf courses of Palm Beach, the beautiful lands that DeSantis has made. Ron DeSanctimonious. I'm working on it, folks. I really am working on a good impression for you. But look, we're talking about this statute of limitations that kind of even simplified even more for you, because it does get kind of difficult in understanding what the hell's happening here. Is one of the mechanisms that they're trying to push here is that the hush money ran out of the statute of limitations, if I'm getting this correctly. And you have Alvin Bragg saying, hey, we can continue this statute of limitations by attaching it to another crime of this hush money payment or another payment. And furthermore, we can attach it to New York and continue the statute of limitations because he was in another state, and they basically took that time in other states and tacked that onto the ever-increasing statute of limitations, basically. And that word continuous is important because he wasn't always continuously living in other states. He was traveling around, and thus the statute of limitations theoretically shouldn't hold up here in this case. And furthermore, we know that they can't utilize it, of what she's mentioning here in terms of the indictment, because they literally indicted him while he was in another state. So I think it's a pretty strong case here.
Florida, why couldn't they have indicted him while he was in Washington?
Exactly.
Why couldn't they have indicted him while I was in Florida the last 2 or 3 years?
Correct.
So the policies behind the statute of limitations are clearly violated. There's no good reason they didn't indict him earlier, except that nobody wanted to indict him earlier.
Exactly.
DAs, U.S. attorneys, federal election officials said, no, we're not going to indict him. The statute of limitations requires you indict somebody as reasonably quickly as you can within the terms of the statute. Now, there is a New York Court of Appeals decision, very wrongly decided, which basically defines the word continuously as continually and says that every day that he's out of the state doesn't count. That's ridiculous.
That's what I was just referring to. That's insane. And I believe, and I'm really trying to reach back when I was an accountant on this, specifically taxation, I believe they do that in terms of where you're living in the state as well, in terms of tax penalties and interest. Now, that's way out of the scope of this video here, but I actually agree with Dershowitz on this whole thing. I think it's insane to sit there and that you're going to stretch out a statute of limitation because you're not continuously living in that state, and so you can just tack that on. I think that's insane.
Ridiculous. The policies behind the statute of limitations are clear. He should not be allowed to be tried. He's been denied a speedy trial, a fair trial, a trial in the right venue, and the misdemeanor is a made-up misdemeanor. Here's what the misdemeanor basically says. It says that when you pay hush money to hide an adulterous affair with a former porn star, and you pay $130,000 to make sure your wife, your family, the voters, the business associates don't learn about it, you must immediately record that in your public corporate records. You must stay in your corporate records. I paid the money to keep it quiet, but now I'm telling you I paid the money to keep it quiet, and it'll be on the Megyn Kelly show tomorrow. Has anybody ever truthfully described what a hush money payment was for? Has anybody in history ever been indicted for that? If you don't have that, you don't have anything, because you can't get the felony without first getting the misdemeanor. There is no misdemeanor here.
Now, granted, we don't have the supplemental evidence to go along with this. And to be fair, this is a lot of hearsay, but look, we're just trying to gather what we know so far and listening to the legal experts themselves. And look, you don't even have to be a fan of Trump to see that this is a bogus indictment here. You literally have people that hate Donald Trump. They're going, yeah, this isn't much. And that's why I present to you here, John Bolton, that literally wrote a book basically going after Trump. He doesn't like Trump. He literally says that in this clip here, and he explains how this is a lackluster indictment.
We're joined now by former ambassador and Trump national security advisor, John Bolton. Thank you so much for joining us. Two quick questions for you. One, big picture, what do you think of the indictment?
Well, speaking as someone who very strongly does not want Donald Trump to get the Republican presidential nomination, I'm extraordinarily distressed by this document. I think this is even weaker than I feared it would be. And I think it's easily subject to being dismissed or a quick acquittal for Trump. Just speaking, going back to the days when I represented Jim Buckley and Gene McCarthy and the constitutional challenge to the underlying federal statute here passed in 1974, I can say there is no basis in the statutory language to say that Trump's behavior forms either a contribution or an expenditure under federal law, the two key definitions at issue here. If it did, it would mean that every single expenditure a candidate made could be taken to have something to do with his campaign. Do I buy a $1 comb to comb my hair or a $10 comb to comb my hair? If you can construe the statute to cover this behavior, then I think it violates the First Amendment, because you're deeply into territory that makes this statute, absolutely, the federal statute, too vague for enforcement. And as what I understood the district attorney to say, that he thinks there's a New York election law involved here, all I can say is the Federal Election Campaign Act absolutely preempts any state or local law to the contrary. How could it be otherwise? You've got one law governing corporate finance in a presidential election at the federal level. You're going to have 50 state laws interfering with it. So he's just wrong on the applicability of the New York statute.
A lot to digest there, but one other thing I want to note is that
there's not really a lot to digest there. I mean, he was extremely clear about what he just said. And by the way, what he's tackling here in terms of what John Bolton said is different than what we heard from Dershowitz just in the segment before with Megyn Kelly. Dershowitz is going after more so the statute of limitations. He's going more so after the federal and state level
as well as just kind of what you even categorize as campaign finance and what is even involved in that it's very vague, or at least what they're trying to do is create it very vague. And at that point, when it's vague, how do you uphold that? And then you're more transitioning into a First Amendment argument. I mean, it wasn't hard to follow whatsoever. John Bolton did a great job. Again, John Bolton is not a fan of Trump.
The statement of facts describes Donald Trump inviting David Pecker, the CEO of the National Enquirer parent company, AMI, who helped pay off Karen McDougal, the Playboy Playmate of the month, or of the year, I should say.
I believe this is what they're trying to attach here, to extend the statute of limitations for the Stormy Daniels $130,000 of hush money so that they could sit there and indict him and basically pull this off. I mean, the strings you are pulling here as Alvin Bragg is insane. It is nuts. We've never seen anything like this. What this man is doing to Trump is wrong. And Donald Trump Jr. in yesterday's episode wasn't wrong with saying this is some communism type bleep. This would make Mao blush. He wasn't far off on that statement. That's for damn sure.
Who was given $150,000 to keep her story quiet, catch and kill. The defendant, Donald Trump, invited Pecker to the White House for a dinner to thank him for his help during the campaign. So that's after Trump was president. And then there's another reference where Donald Trump and Michael Cohen, lawyer A, meet in the Oval Office at the White House to confirm the repayment arrangement. Now, that's obviously an attempt to show that this was election-related, help provided by Michael Cohen, help provided by David Pecker. It's also, you know, as was said during the Clinton presidency for different reasons, rather gross that this is happening in the confines of the White House.
Yeah. Well, I think the defense attorneys don't have to prove that Trump had a different intent. They simply have to show reasonable doubt.
Which is extremely hard to do. I mean, the whole reasonable doubt thing, and this is something kind of even Ben Shapiro's echoed, Megyn Kelly, a lot of people that have law degrees, and we learned this even in business law as well for our taxation degree, or in other words, our accountancy degrees. It is extremely hard to prove that. And Trump is set up really, really well to prove the opposite of which Alvin Bragg's trying to go after him for. And I hope that he highlights that here.
That the intent was to affect federal election. And I can come up with a very plausible reason why a person would have the intent of paying these hush money payments. He doesn't want his wife to find out about it.
That's what John Edwards claimed. Yeah.
And I think to the average juror, that's a pretty convincing argument.
Yes.
They do address, I should just say, I mean, they do address that in the documents where they say there was discussion about delaying the payment until after the election, perhaps even not paying until after the election so that they didn't have to pay it if Trump won. So I'm just to say, the idea that it was just to hide it from Melania is kind of addressed in the document.
Right.
But that doesn't change anything. You basically just sat there and asserted and basically made the case of what Trump is going to do and say. And so it's going to be hard to provide that negligence or that assertion in the first place. So Trump is kind of set up for success on that front there. I don't really know why she's adding that in here. Let's see what John Bolton has to say about that comment.
I'm not saying that's the fact. I'm just saying the defense can make a case
reasonable
that puts reasonable doubt in. This is in a criminal case. They often say you have to prove 95%, not a civil case where you only have to prove 51%.
And I just want to say that.
Exactly right. And again, I'm not a lawyer, folks, okay? So take what I have to say as a grain of salt. I'm just trying to sit there and reiterate and kind of package this in a way that's digestible, that's easily to be understood, that we can all kind of figure out what the heck is going on here. Because when you hear all these stations, whether you're listening to the Daily Wire, the Blaze, the Bald Brad Show, you're listening to CNN, MSNBC, ABC, the Associated Press, I mean, whoever it may be, everybody has their opinion. And at some point it comes across as a bunch of spider webs and trying to figure it out. There's really two mechanisms to this whole thing, one of which we saw with the statute of limitations, and the other end we just saw with John Bolton's idea. So let me know what you think about all this. We'll try to keep you up to date. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Bald Brad Show. We went almost an hour today, folks. I love hanging out with you. Go over to baldbrad.com. We got a store there, folks, for you to buy merchandise. You could buy shirts. You can buy our book on Amazon. Link is in the description, folks. Trojan Horse, How the Left is Destroying America. Get your friends a copy, folks. Buy yourself a hard copy, paperback. Even the ebook's a little bit cheap, folks. It is a phenomenal read. We're getting great reviews on Amazon. I appreciate all those that are reading it. Jen, I know you're reading it. Again, Lisa, thanks for buying Mama a mug. They're fabulous to drink out of. Everybody who has one, why don't we cheers each other, folks? Thank you so much for always supporting the show. Leave us a comment down below. It does yeoman's work in supporting the show, folks. We're all of firm belief here that we're being shadow banned. There's no way in heck we get 25 views in an hour with over 32,000 subscribers. There's just no way. And it's consistent in it's a uniform distribution. That doesn't happen unless there's some sort of interference taking place, folks. So leave us a comment down below. Really support us. It could be anything. I do read them. I love hearing what you have to say. And folks, we'll be back here for another episode of The Brad Show.
I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Bald Brad Show. If you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all our future content.